And so then he goes on in Romans 9:14, he says, "What then shall we say? Is God unjust?" So is God unjust that, this is kind of similar to me of the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain brought his offering to God, Abel brought his offering to God, God accepted Abel's, and we know, multiple places in the New Testament that describe Abel as having faith. So in some way, when Abel brought his offering to God, he was doing it by faith. What he was really offering to God wasn't anything but his faith and trust and reliance on God. That's why Abel's offering was accepted. But Cain brought to God an offering too. It wasn't like Cain was just like, "No, God, I don't want anything to do with you. I hate you. I'm going to go live in sin." That wasn't Cain's mindset. I think Cain's mindset was the exact mindset of the Jews in this context in Romans 9, where they were bringing God an offering in sincerity. They wanted God's favor. They wanted God's acceptance. Cain wanted that from God, I believe. And so they brought, just like Israel is doing here in Romans 9, Cain brought God an offering. But where did that offering come from? Remember, is an offering from the fruit of the ground, right? It came from the ground. God cursed the ground, if you remember that. And when Adam and Eve fell, he cursed the ground, right? And so in some way, what Cain was doing, I think, was a picture and an act of human effort and energy, just like all these other things we're seeing, all these other pictures, where what Cain was doing was trying to bring forth from the ground that God had cursed. And in the same way, God has cursed, in a sense, our flesh, and anything we try to bring to him from the flesh is cursed. It's filthy rags. God can't accept it. But Cain was trying to bring to God an offering, bring it forth from that place where God had cursed, and God didn't accept it. That's exactly what the Jews are doing. It's not that they're not sincere. It's not that they don't actually want God's favor. It's not that they're not actually trying or putting forth effort. They are. They absolutely are. Israel is in this context, but God is still saying, "I don't accept that. I don't accept what you're bringing to me, but I do accept the Gentiles, what they're bringing to me." And that is what is just driving these guys insane. That's so offensive to them, and they're saying, and that's what Paul is preemptively knowing is going to come, is that the Jews here are seeing God accepting the Gentiles' offering of faith and accepting them, while they're bringing their law keeping and their, all the things we've listed over and over, being a part of Israel. They're bringing everything that belongs to that, and God's still saying, "I don't accept that. I don't want that. Even though you continue to bring that to me, you've not accepted my way. And so now, rather than accept your offering, I'm actually going to blind you and harden you and use you to accomplish mercy and salvation for the Gentiles." So you can see you don't need even a Calvinistic determinism here to see what the offense would be of the Jews, why they're offended, why these questions are rising up. Because even for a modern day self-righteous person who would work their whole life and do all they can do to try to please God, and still you can do that your whole life and not find God's favor. And human wisdom would say, "Man, that's not fair. That's not right. God, I tried my best. I did everything I could." But what God sees is he looks at the heart and says, "You didn't believe the promises I'd given. You didn't believe the light. You didn't accept and embrace the offer that I was holding out. But you just like the Jews, you ignored it. And you didn't accept that invitation, but you chose to rely on your own ways, your own thoughts. You did what you wanted to do. You brought to me your own understanding rather than trusting me." That's what Israel's doing here, and God's rejecting it. That's what Cain did, and God rejected it. And that's why there's this question rising up, where Paul's saying, what shall we say? Is God unjust? Is God wrong to not choose works of the law? Is God wrong to have these Jews who are coming to him with so much sincerity, with their DNA connection to Abraham, with the claim that, "God, you made promises to Israel," and God saying, "I don't accept that"? The instinct for the Jews would be, well, that's not just, that's not right, that's not fair. But what does Paul reply with? He says, not at all. God's not unjust, for he says to Moses, "I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion." And so basically Paul's saying, look, guys, God can choose the kind of people. He can choose who he wants to have mercy on. Okay, so here's what's not unclear. Like, is it unclear biblically who God has chosen to have mercy on. It's very clear, and I think it's very simple. And like Paul, the Bible kind of has a one-track mind. Those who God has mercy on are who? Well, it's those who have faith. It's those who have the faith of Abraham. Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. We are saved by grace through faith. Grace comes through faith. Mercy comes through faith and believing God. That's just God's chosen way. That's God's chosen vessel of mercy. Faith in Christ is the way through which God has chosen to extend his mercy. And so when he says, I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion, what's not up in the air, what's not a mystery is who these people are. And I think, again, I keep bringing up Calvinism and Reformed theology. I want to make clear, I'm not doing this to be a bully or to pick on anybody, or I'm trying to be respectful as I'm doing this, but I just want to make the contrast clear, and I want to help clarify, because I know when I read this stuff where my mind would go and how I could so quickly get off track and get offline from what Paul was actually arguing for. And so when he says here, I'll have mercy on whom I have mercy, I'll have compassion on whom I have compassion. Basically, Paul's saying, look, God can have mercy on who he wants. He gets to choose the category of people. He gets to choose who he gives mercy to. And so I think in a Reformed understanding, they would say, well, it's kind of a mystery. God just chooses. He has mysteriously chooses and does choose who he gives mercy to. We don't know who, we don't know why. We don't know why he gives mercy to who he gives mercy to, and we don't know why he withholds it from the people that he does withhold it from. We don't know why God gives some people compassion and chooses to elect them and save them, and we don't know why he withholds it, arguably from the vast majority. He withholds his compassion from the vast majority of humanity, and rather than displaying his love and kindness and grace, he's chosen to display on the majority of people his wrath. I think, and I won't say that's the mindset of all Calvinists or people who hold the Reformed theology, but I would say that the most popular teachers today are really the ones I want to give a reply and an alternative view to, and I think that's kind of the understanding that they would give here. And so what I'm saying is that they would ultimately say that this is a mystery, that who God chooses, who God gives mercy to, who he gives compassion to, they'd say it's a mystery. I would say, no, it's just absolutely not. The Bible doesn't leave that up to being a mystery. It's not a mystery. We see over and over again, both Old and New Testament, who God gives mercy to. It's humble yourself and God will lift you up. It's those who humble themselves. It's those who believe. It's those who seek after God. It's the poor in spirit. Going back to that, it's the weak. It's the foolish thing of the world. And so we know that the category of people that God gives mercy to and gives compassion to is, again, it's not a mystery. It's not in the dark as to what kind of people those are. And I think that would stay in the same context and stay in the same track of thought that Paul's on, that, okay, listen, guys, you're offended. He's saying this to the Jews. You're offended because I'm saying God's not giving you mercy or compassion because you're coming to him with works of the law, and he's rejecting that. And he's giving mercy to the Gentiles who are coming merely on the basis of faith, and he's accepting that. And I know Jews, you're saying that's unjust, that's not fair. But look, God can show mercy to whoever he wants. He can choose, he can select the kind of people, he can select who he wants to have mercy on and who he wants to have compassion on. And then, and so again, that's not left in the air. What Paul's arguing for is, and God has chosen. It's not a mystery who he's chosen to have mercy on or who he's chosen to have compassion on. We just need to read the Bible and we'll see clearly what kind of people, what category of people that is, and that's those with the faith of Abraham. And so Paul's just saying he has that right to choose. He can choose whatever he wants, and it's not a mystery as to what he has chosen. That's been made clear. So then in 16 he says, it does not therefore depend on human desire or effort. So that's another way of him saying it doesn't matter what works you're doing, all your law keeping, all your DNA connection to Abraham, all that, it doesn't get you anywhere, because it does not depend on works, but it depends on God's mercy. This really is just Ephesians 2:9. This is another way that Paul's saying Ephesians 2:9, where he says, it is by grace you have been saved through faith, this not from yourselves. That is the gift of God. That salvation is a gift. It's a gift of God. It doesn't come by human desire or effort or willpower. It doesn't. And so the contrast here is it doesn't come by human desire or effort, but it comes by faith. So it's not by works, so that no one can boast. So the contrast here is not that it's not by works and faith. Again, a Reformed position would say, well, if when he says it's not by human desire or effort, or it's not by human will or effort, they would say, well, see there, it says it's not by human will. So it's not up to your free will to choose whether to believe God or not. And you're absolutely missing the point here if you go there, because what he's doing here is, again, he's doing the same thing he does in Ephesians 2:9, where he's not contrasting works with the work of faith with God's unconditional election. He's contrasting works of the law with faith. And so faith is always described in biblical terms. It's always described as something that is in direct contrast with works. It's something that directly contrasts human effort and willpower, like Paul's describing here. That faith is the opposite of this. So when he says it doesn't depend on human desire or effort, I think you could rightly say it doesn't depend on human desire or effort, but on faith, which comes, but on God's mercy, which comes through faith. So it's not about human desire and effort. It's not about us, which is what the Jews were doing. They're bringing their sincerity, their efforts, and their willpower, which stands in direct contrast with faith. To human desire and effort here, really what I'm trying to get across is this is not a synonym for faith, which is what a Reformed position, what a Reformed teacher would want to communicate here. And I just sincerely think that's just wrong. That's just so mistaken. That is just so not the point that is being made here. But when he says it's not human desire, or effort, that's not a synonym for faith. You couldn't put in there and say, so it does not depend on a person's faith, but on God's mercy. That just absolutely would not make sense. What does make sense is that he's staying on that same track, and he's saying, therefore, it does not depend, Jews, on your connection to Abraham, on your law keeping, on your sincerity of wanting my acceptance, of wanting God's acceptance, and being like Cain, you're bringing everything to God that you can give. That doesn't cut it, because it doesn't depend on that human desire and effort, but it depends on faith, right? It depends on being a child of promise. It depends on the faith of Abraham, that you're counted righteous like Abraham. You're accredited that righteousness not on the basis of human desire and effort, not on the basis of works of the law, but on God's mercy, which comes by faith, which we know by so many scriptures in the New Testament. God's grace comes through faith. Faith is the doorway through which we attain God's mercy.